The 85-year-old tycoon who turned Chanel into a $15 billion business has made his move, and instead of picking a supermodel, he picked a Manila tennis player. Elaine Wertheimer has dressed pop singers, princesses, and members of Hollywood monarchy. He is never, ever personally presented with an athlete sponsorship offer. However, the reclusive Chanel owner took an extraordinary action when the French Open revealed its player list. He answered the telephone. $45 million was the offer. The state. Before Alex Eala could get onto the clay, she had to say yes. The same question is being posed by the tennis community. A 20-year-old who hasn't achieved a Grand Slam is the house of Chanel C. February 10, 2026, Paris, France, 9 a.m. After going live, the Roland Garros ticketing system crashed in a few minutes. The French Open, a crown gem on the red clay that has played host to superstars for more than a century, is the second Grand Slam of the year. Every year, tournament organizers get ready for mayhem by upgrading their servers, hiring more workers, and preparing for the typical influx of spectators eager to see the top players in the world compete for the championship. However, the Roland Garros ticket office was unprepared for Alex Eala in 2026. More than 85,000 admirers swarmed the system as soon as the virtual gates opened. They were concentrated rather than dispersed throughout the world. IP addresses from the Philippines, the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and all around Europe flooded in connection requests. The waiting list, which was only intended to accommodate a few thousand names at most, grew uncontrollably, the servers faltered, the website crashed, the Filipino diaspora mobilized throughout Europe, and the French Open organizers, staring at their screens in shock, realized they had a problem they had never encountered before. One tournament source later acknowledged that they only paid when Alex played, reiterating what officials from Indian Wells in Dubai had said. The Eala impact, the phenomenon that had transformed stadiums from Melbourne to Madrid into seas of Philippine flags, had reached Paris with an unexpected ferocity. In Dubai, where a sizable portion of the population consists of Filipinos employed abroad, the numbers were astounding. The elimination stages of Eala's matches were sold out, but the finals, in contrast, were never full. Hundreds of Filipino fans overcrowded the court at the Australian Open in Melbourne, causing havoc with tickets and organizational problems. Now, Paris was dealing with a similar situation. The stadiums were packed, tickets were selling, and prices were skyrocketing, but in the silent hallways of the Roland Garros administration building, a different kind of dread was growing that no one dared to express aloud. The French Open organizers were more concerned about a first-round exit than a ticket crash, so allow me to take you inside the emergency meeting that followed the secondary market eruption. The faces at the table conveyed a different message despite the room's sterility, lack of windows, and focus on practicalities rather than high drama. Amélie Mauresmo, the tournament director, sat at the head with her jaw set and her arms folded. With their laptops open and spreadsheets flashing with projections that appeared to change hourly, her deputies stood on either side of her. Ticketing managers, marketing executives, and security chiefs were crammed into a room that was suddenly too small for the situation. The screen displayed the numbers. Within minutes of the ticket announcement, more than 85,000 fans were in wait online. In the first hour, the official lottery crashed 3 times. The average secondary market price for A-List's first-round match was €1,200, which was more than the price of the men's final tickets. Before anybody knew if she would even advance that far, speculative listings had risen to €5,000 for a possible quarterfinal matchup with a top seed. The ticketing manager replied in a tense voice, "This is unprecedented. Demand for a first-round match has never been this high for Federer, Nadal, or Serena." Mauresmo answered, "We know. What happens if Hillary loses is the question, not whether the tickets will sell." There was silence in the room. Nobody wanted to respond. Because the event organizers had seen the negative aspects of the Eala effect at Dubai, Melbourne, and Indian Wells. The stadiums were full, the flags fluttered, and the chants resounded when Eala performed. However, the crowds didn't just thin, they completely disappeared when she lost and her streak came to an end. Tickets had increased 48% year-over-year in Dubai, where Eala had advanced to the quarterfinals. The stands at her matches had been crammed to capacity. But she wasn't present for the semi-finals? They hadn't had the same vigor. Even though it was a championship match, the finals had not created the same excitement. An Indian Wells official had observed that they only paid when Alex played, outlining the pattern that had grown all too familiar. The French Open was now in danger of being overturned by the same pattern. The event would experience an unparalleled surge in demand if Eala prevailed in her first-round match. However, the enthusiasm could vanish suddenly if the 20-year-old Filipina loses to her more experienced opponent. The marketing director stated, "We've already sold the tickets. The atmosphere and energy are uncertain, but the money is in the bank." The secondary market, what about it? An additional official inquired. "Those prices will plummet if she loses. Thousands of dollars worth of fans will be incensed. The secondary market is beyond our control. The fans are beyond our control. All we can do is get ready." Without a clear plan, the meeting was adjourned. The French Open would go on as planned, matches would be played, and trophies would be raised, but the Eala impact loomed large, serving as a reminder that in today's tennis world, the biggest stars aren't usually the ones with the highest rankings. They are the ones who pack stadiums, motivate pilgrimages, and cause 40,000 spectators to overwhelm a ticketing system in order to raise their flags. And nobody was more aware of that than Alex Eala. Later that evening, the 20-year-old Filipina sat with her mother, Risa, in a peaceful hotel room with a view of the Seine. Messages from her friends, instructors, and agent buzzed through her phone. There was constant speculation, there were headlines everywhere, and there was tremendous pressure. "What if I lose, Mama? What happens if I disappoint them?" Risa grasped her daughter's hand. "Anak, you could never disappoint them. They have already received more from you than they could have ever imagined. If you lose, the flags, the opportunity, and the love don't go away. They only bide their time till the next game." Eala modified slowly. "However, those who spent thousands for the tickets, Eala, they didn't pay to see you succeed. You'll give them what they paid to see you fight. You'll fight whether you win or lose. They have only ever asked you to do that." The Eiffel Tower glistened in the distance outside. Below, the metropolis of Paris shimmered. The competition that a 20-year-old from Manila had revolutionized was waiting at the French Open. The question that remained was whether the tennis community was prepared for what Alex Eala had already become, not whether she would win. A diaspora that had been dispersed for generations started to travel across the world, heading toward Roland Garros, Paris, and a 20-year-old who had given them a reason to come together. Tickets were sold, flights were scheduled, and flags were packed. What transpired in the weeks preceding the competition was not a fan migration, so allow me to take you inside the quiet revolution that the French Open ticketing data was unable to document. A return home. Travel. Businesses in Manila reported an increase in reservations for trips to Paris. In order to meet the demand, Philippine Airlines added more flights, but the seats still filled up in a matter of hours. Filipinos from all over the world called the Department of Tourism to inquire about accommodations, visa requirements, and the best route to Roland Garros. There were a lot of plans in WhatsApp groups in Dubai, where more than 450,000 Filipinos live and work. Schedules for carpooling were planned. Rates for groups were negotiated. Fans who had never met before became traveling companions, united by a common hero and flag. An admirer named Marites told a reporter, "I've been in Dubai for 12 years. I've never gone on vacation. All of my money is sent home. However, I'm visiting Paris this year." "Why now, Mama?" my daughter asked me. I told her that I needed to wave our flag and feel like I belonged somewhere because Alex was playing. The same discussions were taking on in London, Los Angeles, Toronto, and Sydney. Families who hadn't seen one another in years organized reunions around a tennis match, savings accounts were depleted, and leave requests were filed. As they saw the numbers rise, the French Open organizers, who were still getting over the ticketing disaster, felt both amazed and nervous. To meet the anticipated masses, they had increased seating, added more sessions, and even thought about adding more stadium sections. However, nothing could have prepared them for the scope of what lay ahead. A tournament official acknowledged, "We've never seen anything like this. Not for Serena, not for Nadal, not for Federer. This is not the same. It has nothing to do with tennis. This has nothing to do with that." The Eala effect, the phenomena that had converted stadiums into homecomings, made a diaspora feel seen, and elevated a 20-year-old into a symbol, was the other factor. Now, Paris was experiencing this phenomenon. The security staff prepared for more people than the stadium had ever accommodated. The ticket office was ready for the inevitable concerns over availability, pricing, and the secondary market's pandemonium. Knowing that every game she played would make news outside of the sports section, the media organized their coverage around the Eala impact. However, the lingering question was emotional rather than practical. One writer questioned, "What does it mean that a player ranked number 38 has become the most sought-after ticket in tennis?" The establishment was unhappy with the response, which was discussed in press boxes and whispered in locker rooms. It meant that a player's worth could no longer be determined solely by the conventional measurements of success rankings, titles, and Grand Slam totals. It implied that community, connection, and the capacity to make others feel seen were intangible assets. Additionally, it meant that Alex Eala, a 20-year-old Manila native who had never won a Grand Slam, had already achieved something far more significant. A movement had been won by her. The flags were packed, the planes were scheduled, and the tickets were sold. And Alex Eala entered Court Philippe Chatrier for the French Open's opening round early on May 24, 2026. The old stadium has never heard a roar like the one that welcomed her. It was the thunder of a people who had discovered their voice, not the courteous applause of a tennis crowd. Laban Alex's chants reverberated off the red earth as the Philippine flags fluttered in unison. There were nurses, carers, engineers, visionaries, and the 40,000 fanatics who had smashed the ticketing system. They had left their families behind, taken time off work, and spent money they didn't have. They had come to see a miracle, not to watch a tennis play. Eala took a stride toward the baseline. The battle-hardened soldier who faced her stared around in shock. For 10 years, she has participated in Grand Slams. In front of 20,000 spectators, she had taken on Serena Williams. This was unlike anything she had ever heard. The game started. The flags continued to fly, the chanting continued to resound, and gradually the tension subsided. At first, Eala was anxious, her movements timid, her shots tentative, the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders. In the fourth game, she broke serve. The stadium burst into flames. "Serve to love," she held. The flags began to wave more quickly. The audience that had traveled across oceans stood up when she won the opening set 6-4. There was a struggle in the second set. Eala was pushed to deuce after deuce by her opponent, who resisted being overtaken by the commotion. However, the Filipina persisted. The OFWs who had spent money they didn't have came to mind. The nurses who had taken time off were on her mind. She remembered the kids who had waved flags from the stands, hoping to be noticed in the future. With a forehand victory later on, she won the last point at 5-3. On the baseline, the ball landed flush. All her opponent could do was observe. The stadium blew apart. Eala dropped to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably and raising her racket. A grandmother named Luz, who had come from Lyon, held her flag and sobbed somewhere in the stands as the flags fluttered and the chants resounded. She murmured that she had done it. "She took care of things for us." The French Open had witnessed luminaries retire and winners crowned, but it had never witnessed a first-round triumph hailed like this, not because of the score, but because of what it meant. Although Alex Eala had not broken the top 10 or won a Grand Slam, she had accomplished something that no ranking could match. She had given folks a sense of being seen. The supporters carried something far more priceless than a memory as they filed out of Roland Garros, their flags still waving and their voices still hoarse from singing, despite the costly tickets, lengthy flights, and genuine sacrifices. They brought evidence that they were real, important, and that the Eala effect was about them rather than a tennis player. The remaining question is easier to answer than it first appears. Will the next generation of Filipino athletes remember Alex Eala's triumphs or the love that made her unstoppable when they take the stage, motivated by the flags they saw in Paris, the chants they heard from the stands, and the woman who transformed a tennis tournament into a homecoming? For more stories that go beyond the score, leave a comment below and subscribe to Court Legacy. The Roland Garros booking system repeatedly crashed as over 85,000 fans lined up online within minutes of the 2026 French Open tickets being released. IP addresses from the Philippines, the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and the Philippine diaspora throughout Europe made up the vast bulk of connection requests. Tickets to the men's final were more expensive than the average secondary market price of €1,200 for Alex Eala's first-round match. Listings for a possible quarter-final topped €5,000. Recognizing that they had never witnessed such demand for a first-round match, the French Open organizers called an emergency meeting. The pattern was similar to earlier competitions. Eala's bout saw a 48% year-over-year increase in ticket sales in Dubai, but the semifinals and finals lacked the same fervor. Officials at Indian Wells saw that Filipino spectators only paid when Alex performed. According to reports, the WTA is re-evaluating its marketing plan. Even in the first round, Eala, ranked 38, will take on the 17th seed.